Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I have a microphone, so I can't tell if it's getting back there. All right, so thanks for inviting me. This is a really nice opportunity to be able to talk to you all about some of the work that's going on within the national laboratories. I've slanted it towards bioscience because that's really my background. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of an introduction of really what the national labs are, what we work on, go into what PNNL is doing, and then give you a couple of examples of work that we're doing in the biosciences program, but I can only really give you the tip of the iceberg tonight. And then I'm going to segue, and for those of you who heard my talk this morning, I'm going to segue into a new direction relative to what I covered this morning, because there were some people who gave me feedback that they want to learn more about how should external organizations engage with the national labs. And so I have a few slides talking about how we partner with academia and industry, and some of the results of those collaborations. And so at any time, if you guys want to ask me a question, feel free, just raise your hand. We can go back and forth. I want this to not necessarily be a formal presentation where I'm just broadcasting at you, but maybe more of a conversation. So with that, let's start with a brief primer about the Department of Energy labs. Whoops. Here we go. So there are 17 DOE national laboratories, and as you can see, they're distributed all around the country. I'm currently at Pacific Northwest National Lab, as David said, but I spent 16 years at Sandia National Lab before I came to PNNL. And so you may note that Sandia is a little bit weird because it has two pointers going from it. It has a main site in Albuquerque, New Mexico, but I was working in the Livermore, California site. And so coming back to the Pacific Northwest, I'm a native here. Coming back after spending 21 years in the Bay Area has been fantastic. I really am enjoying it. The Pacific Northwest is a special place. But see, there are 17 national laboratories, and PNNL is one of the 10 Office of Science laboratories. And so each one of these laboratories has a sponsoring office within the Department of Energy. And so the Office of Science is really focused on, delivering on fundamental science in support of, the advancing U.S. competitiveness in the sciences. But you'll hear a little bit more about how multidisciplinary PNNL is for an Office of Science laboratory. So the DOE labs are different than maybe what you'll see in academia or industry, because they're really focused on big national problems and they're mission driven. So they're focused on challenges that the Department of Energy cares about in the areas of national security, environmental management, energy, and fundamental science. We tend, as a lab network, to focus more long-term, down the road, tackling challenges that are high risk and high reward. As David mentioned in his introduction, we're a multidisciplinary place, and so I ended up joining Sandia originally because when I went to interview there, I interviewed with engineers, so I have a biology background. I interviewed with engineers, chemists, physicists, material scientists, and I thought, well, this would be fantastic. This would be a place where I, as a biologist, could come in and join a team where everybody's coming in with their own perspectives on how to solve a problem, and we can actually start to work in that interdisciplinary way that I always think is the most interesting part of doing science. So the labs are really focused on pulling together these bigger teams to tackle these challenges. And unlike industry, the labs are not profit centers, and so we're not really focused at all on developing products that will produce en masse and market and sell. And so that frees us up to tackle challenges that maybe aren't as attractive to industry because there isn't a strong market driver at the back end. Each one of the labs have a set of capabilities and facilities that are specific to that laboratory and in support of the mission. And towards the end of the talk, I'll talk about how the labs are real economic engines for their particular regions, and how the labs are focused on doing S&T in support of the nation, but a part of having impact at the national labs is taking the intellectual property that we generate and move it out into the hands of companies who license that technology and convert it into products. All right, so some of the big hits from the DOE lab system in biology. What's not widely appreciated is actually the Human Genome Project started as an idea within the Department of Energy. So the DOE has a long history of being interested in understanding the effects of radiation on the human genome. And so in 1987, DOE initiated its own kind of small-scale human genome project. A year later, Congress tasked DOE and NIH to come together to team up and put together a project plan for what eventually became the Human Genome Project. And they collaborated and put out the first 5-year plan in 1990. So I just want to give kudos to DOE for being the agency that really got that started. The second is DOE scientists discovered messenger RNA. They called it DNA-like RNA. And this was at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And they first reported on it in the late 50s, but the general scientific literature didn't recognize the significance of what they discovered until a little while later. But yeah, but they actually were the ones that first discovered this sort of transient species of RNA that appeared to be very similar in sequence to the DNA of a particular host. And finally, another big hit from the DOE labs is understanding photosynthesis. And so this was at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, where they ended up working using isotopic labeling methods to work through exactly how carbon flows through photosynthetic systems. And so that knowledge is now being used by the DOE to figure out new ways that we can learn from biological systems and maybe create abiotic systems that mimic that ability to harvest sunlight and convert it into energy. So PNNL at a glance. I just want to give you a few fun facts about PNNL. We have about a research, this is in R&D expenditures, so in FY15, fiscal year 15, we had about $1 billion of expenditures. About 4,400 people work at the laboratory. Half of that are scientists and engineers. We average at the laboratory about an invention per day and a patent a week over the course of our 50-plus year history as a lab. So it really is a place where a lot of great ideas are being generated every day. We produce about between 1,000 and 1,200 peer-reviewed publications per year. And we're pretty proud of the fact that we get regularly multiple R&D 100 awards, which are called the Oscars of Innovation, as well as Federal Laboratory Consortium awards for the work that we're doing at the lab. So at the lab, basically of this $1 billion a year, about half of that is focused on national security. And so when we get back to the 4 main mission areas of the Department of Energy, we have national security, energy, environmental management, and fundamental science. So about half of the work that we do maps to the national security mission of the department. And so I just want to, this slide is to point out the diversity of the work that goes on within the lab. We do things in nuclear nonproliferation, counter WMD, so biological defense, chem defense, radiological and nuclear defense, basically explosives detection, cybersecurity. And how many of you guys have gone through an airport recently in the security line? Okay, yeah, me too. Have you done this? Okay, so if you've done that, then you're doing the PNNL salute. Because we were the ones that invented the millimeter wave technology that they used to do the whole body scans in the airport systems. In the energy area, which is about the applied energy area, which is about 20% of the laboratory, we focus on environmental remediation. as well as looking at clean and efficient energy. So in that space, we're looking at different kinds of renewables, biofuels, solar. In efficiency, we're looking at how to make smart buildings and have smart buildings talk to a smart grid, which is part of our electrical infrastructure program. We actually are one of the leading laboratories in thinking about grid modernization and thinking about transactive controls, incorporation of renewable and intermittent energy sources onto the grid, and cybersecurity of the grid itself. And then finally, in the fundamental science space, we have strong programs in climate and earth science, biological science, chemistry and materials, particularly catalysis and energy storage materials, and advanced computing. So developing new analytical algorithms to deal with big data, as well as designing architectures for supercomputers. So in biology, we have two major thrust areas. One is looking at Earth and environmental systems. And so understanding everything from the subsurface and the interaction between terrestrial components of the ecosystem, atmospheric components, and we're also really interested in how human activities impact the ecosystem and impact climate. We also focus in on human systems in transition, and this is in the area of public health and biodefense. And so we want to understand how do pathogens interact with the human host, how do they interact with the human microbiome, and how do we actually begin to disrupt that interaction in a controlled way by developing therapeutics, or how can we monitor those interactions by developing diagnostic systems. So I'm going to segue now to give you a few examples of specific projects that we have in each one of those two areas. The first one is the evaluation that we did in partnership with Whoosh Innovations. This was funded by the DOE Small Business Voucher Pilot Program. So what we did was we worked with Whoosh Innovations to understand the impact of their Whoosh fish transport system and how it compares to other commonly used systems, such as trapping fish and hauling. And the reason why this is important is that we have a program at the laboratory that monitors salmon survivability as they pass through dams. And so it's very important that we put systems in place that maintain basically the salmon population. So we're looking at tagging and tracking fish, designing fish-friendly turbines, and then working with companies like Whoosh. So in this particular study, we took a look at, after passage through Whoosh, did the salmon survival differ relative to the trap and haul approach? Did the immune system response differ? Were the fish under stress relative to the traditional method of transporting fish around dams? Were any of them injured, and were their offspring affected? Now you may be asking yourself, what is Whoosh? So I have a video here of one of our scientists to explain the system.
Rivers are a source of renewal for fish and for electricity. But hydropower dams create an obstacle for migratory salmon as they swim upriver to reproduce. To support the production of abundant clean energy without harming wildlife, the Department of Energy has called for new technology to understand and reduce the impacts of hydropower on rivers and fish. DOE's national laboratories are uniquely suited to address these challenges. Take, for example, scientists from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Richland, Washington. Their team is testing a fish transportation system developed by Whoosh Innovations. The Whoosh system uses a flexible tube that works like a vacuum, guiding fish over hydroelectric dams or other structures. Compared to methods used today, this system could save money while granting fish quicker, safer passage through dams and hatcheries.
We're looking at two different lengths of tube, both a 40-foot tube and 250 feet, to compare different scenarios where you might use this system. And we're comparing this to traditionally used methods to handle and carry fish by holding them in a net and carrying them, or by loading them into a truck and then dumping them into a pond or a raceway.
Results from this independent evaluation could help improve this technology so that salmon can swim upriver uninhibited and complete their quest for renewal.
So, Whoosh actually got the attention of the national news media. Oops, there we go.
I'd like to talk about salmon, cat food for people. Tuna's understudy that you hope never has to go on, and that stupid fish that doesn't know how rivers work. Salmon famously have to fight their way upstream to spawn, but thanks to hydroelectric dams, that's become increasingly difficult. But don't worry, because as we found out recently, America is on it.
I'm Ben Tracy in Washington State, where we're going to introduce you to a pretty sweet piece of technology known as the salmon cannon. That's coming up on CBS This Morning.
Sometimes people say the news has lost its touch, but every now and then they f***ing nail it. Because a cannon that fires fish through a tube and over a dam is absolutely incredible. And if you're wondering what it looks like when they come out the other side, the company that makes it, incidentally called Whoosh Innovations, has produced a spectacular slow-motion video set to classical music. In your darkest moments of despair, when you see a world torn apart by war, I want you to remember that video and think, we can do great things. We can do great things. Let me tell you how much I love the salmon cannon. I love it so much, we made our own cannon this week. This thing is pretty powerful. So, who wants to give this puppy a go? Let's see where this salmon ends up.
Of course, the situation in the Mideast only getting more complicated. The U.S. has been bombing for years.
So we know it works. Let's try firing two fish somewhere else.
Thank you, spatulas.
Very nice. Let's try something a little more difficult.
You took my daughter from me. What did you expect?
I'm not trying to deny it, but I don't remember.
Oh, that's convenient.
It cost me your love.
Clearly, this is the greatest object that has ever been invented. So I am emptying this bucket and let us see how big we can go on this thing.
Welcome back. I'm Michelle Vito. Incredible footage coming out of Houston Rockets practice. Howard is injured making a block. Howard broke 2 fingers and is expected to miss.
Members of the Obama administration temporarily withdrew a report about Iran's nuclear program, and that's why it's so important.
Awesome. Except it's bleep, squawk, blue. I'm glad they didn't have to come down.
It gets better.
The Broadway played the real thing. Team Blade.
Hey! I quit. Shut up.
So, PNNL has been working with Whoosh to develop the greatest object ever invented. per John Oliver, who is a very authoritative source. So to get back a little bit to science, how did Whoosh perform? We whooshed salmon 40 feet and 250 feet, as you heard Allison say in the first video. And we measured the survival of the adults versus a control set and trap and haul. And actually we measured a series of different kind of markers of stress and injury to the fish. And we found that basically the Whoosh performed just as well as trap and haul. There was no injury or any change to the physiological function of the fish that were whooshed, either 40 feet or 250 feet. And so now we're continuing to work with Whoosh Innovations to study, to do in-river studies to understand the migration effects. Another example is work that we've done to turn mobile devices into microscopes. And while I play the video, I'm going to pass out little gifts to you all because you too can turn your phone or tablet into a microscope. So.
Now that we've printed our plastic housing,
why don't you take one and pass it on?
Little inexpensive glass beads. You can buy these online for about $1 each.
When you combine a modern smartphone with a 400-year-old design for a microscope, you get a very inexpensive, small device capable of detecting anthrax, or simply looking closer at a bug or a leaf.
There was a scientist, his last name was Leeuwenhoek, and he was really a pioneer in getting a very small handheld microscope. And it was really the first time that people were able to see things at a high magnification. And he achieved that using a small spherical glass bead as his first model.
Researchers at the U.S. Department of Energy's Pacific Northwest National Laboratory did the same thing, creating a small housing for the beads on a 3D printer. The resulting designs can be made from pennies worth of plastic and glass materials.
So we have 3 different magnifications now. We have 100x, a 350x, and a 1000x. And we've also made different versions that will fit multiple phones. We've found that the iPhone 5 provides a more optimal picture, but it is capable of functioning on multiple smartphones and tablets.
PNNL researchers working in national security were looking to develop a tool for first responders, say when a suspicious white powder is discovered.
So the hazmat team would arrive at the scene and they could take a little bit of the sample, put it in a Ziploc bag, and then use the microscope to image right through that bag. And then the image could be sent to a trained microbiologist sitting, in a lab across the country.
It would allow decisions in the field to be made more quickly, and at the other end of the spectrum, be a great tool to inspire students' interest in science.
I think for education, it gives opportunity to all sorts of different backgrounds, be it elementary school all the way up to high school, and even just a career scientist too. The ability to look at microscopic organisms easily without having a big bulky microscope is a beautiful thing.
PNNL is making the designs available online so that anyone with access to a 3D printer, including school districts, can make their own microscopes.
All right. So feel free to experiment with your little cell phone microscope add-on. But if you want to actually get instructions and make your own, you can get the design information at this website. Basically, we're making the designs for this public so that in case you're interested in Christmas gifts for your friends, actually, passing them out to students in our schools, they're really inexpensive to manufacture. It's about 5 cents per little microscope, cell phone microscope. And so we're interested in developing these kinds of technologies that will expand the tool set available to people, not just on the front lines like first responders, but also in limited resource settings. And so being able to come up with 3D printable designs that you can clip onto basically a ubiquitous device like a cell phone is really in line with the kinds of solutions that we're trying to dream up at PNNL. So I said that I was going to segue in the last bit of my talk to talk about, how do we partner with others within the community. We have, just to kick this off, I just want to point out a few statistics about how we're an economic engine for the state. I'd mentioned before that we have about $1 billion budget every year that funds the R&D activities at the laboratory. And that results in, if we look at sort of the goods and services that we purchase and, the jobs that we create, it's about $1.2 billion of total economic output that comes back to the state, and about, 5,700 total jobs that are generated here. One of the things that I thought was particularly noteworthy when I saw this is that the people at the lab are really involved with the community. And so when I saw the statistic of over 43,000 hours volunteered by people at the laboratory across 56 organizations in FY15, it makes me proud, because that just says that, the ethos that brings people to the national laboratories, which is, national service, really does get played out beyond the time that we spend at work, because a lot of people have come to the labs because they want to give back. So can a DOE lab be your next BFF? So we collaborate actually with a broad range of different kinds of partners. And so we work with R&D groups, whether they come from academia or industry, on joint scientific projects. And so there are a couple of different mechanisms. We can write grants with universities and apply for funding across a variety of different federal agencies. We can also work with industry through collaborative research and development agreements called CRADAs, where we put together a team of PNNL scientists or engineers with scientists or engineers at the company to solve a problem that the company is interested in. We are actively engaged in STEM education within the community. A lot of those volunteer hours are people who are going out and working with people in the school districts, distributing technologies like the cell phone microscope, mentoring students. I got to be a judge in the Science Bowl, which was a lot of fun. Boy, those kids are really smart. I mean, it just reminds me of how much I've forgotten since I was in school. And then also we work to make our IP public and licensable by companies who are interested in taking some of our technologies and converting them into products. And so I had mentioned, a couple of these things, collaborative research as well as technologies for licensing, but we also provide assistance and mentoring. So we have programs at the laboratory where we actually pay for some of our researchers' time to work with people in small companies to provide technical assistance. And so a lot of people are unaware of the fact that the DOE labs provide this as a resource to entrepreneurs who want to sort of start up and grow a company. And so, that's part of the reason why I'm here, is to let you guys know that there's so much opportunity that's locked up within the national labs that a lot of people just aren't aware is there. And so, as a result, about 170, it's getting closer to 180 now, businesses have been started by licensing PNNL technology or taking advantage of the expertise within the laboratory through some of these programs. Here's a list of a few of the collaborators that we've been working with over the past couple of years. What you're seeing there is basically Uni Energy Technologies system. It's a redox flow battery that they're developing for stationary storage. But We work across the board. The L3 Security and Detection Systems has licensed the millimeter wave technology. Like I said, they're the ones who have turned the PNNL salute into something that a lot of us do maybe more frequently than we'd like to. Genefuel Corporation, we're working with them to convert algal biomass into fuels. And so we're kind of working across the board with a variety of big companies and small companies. Uni Energy Technologies is actually a company that spun out of PNNL, and now it's located here on the west side. You know, the PI who is the CEO of that company is a former PNNL PI. How do you find out what technologies are available for licensing? Like I said, we try to be really transparent about that, and so we have a web page that is publicly available. You can search it, and you know, you can contact our technology commercialization group. You can contact me. You all apparently know David, so he knows how to get a hold of me, but we're very interested in figuring out ways that we can get some of this technology out in the hands of people who can use them. And then we also have a series of student and university opportunities. I know that there are some students here in the audience, also potentially several faculty members. So we have postdoc fellowships that we offer at the laboratory. We also have joint appointment programs with universities. So we do have a memorandum of understanding with the University of Washington, and we have dual appointees coming from PNNL to the university and also going back the other way. And so if that's something that you might be interested in as a faculty member, please let me know. We also, of course, work with universities in a collaborative way, like I said, writing grants together. And we have a user facility called the Environmental Molecular Sciences Laboratory, which is really an analytical powerhouse, particularly in looking at biological systems. And so there's a way for you as a user of the community to write a proposal to use that facility to support your research. And I know that some of you may actually be at the point in your life where you're graduating, looking for the opportunities. So I have to put in a plug for jobs at jobs.pnnl.gov. We're looking for bright, motivated people who want to solve really challenging problems that face us as a nation and which face the world. And so I hope that some of the things that I've shown you sparked an interest and maybe inspires you to also take a look at the job opportunities available at the lab. And so with that, I'll just close and I'll take your questions.